Here's the snap. Winston rolling right. Throws the pass to the other. It's caught! It's caught! It's caught! Touchdown FSU! Noles retake the lead.
An all-access look at Florida State athletics.
He's tackled. Game over. Noles are the champions of college football. Telvin Smith with the tackle to bring down Mason. Celebrate Seminoles.
From the Seminoles.com Pod Center, high atop Doak Campbell Stadium, here's your host, Jonathan Shalacy.
We have taken the podcast on the road, North Carolina, Charlotte to be exact, and it is a gloomy day outside and supposed to be tomorrow for the ACC championship game between Florida State and Georgia Tech. Jonathan Shalacy alongside Tim Linnefeld, and kickoff, well, we're talking about 28 hours from now.
Give or take.
About, this is going to be a good one, though. Florida State finishing its 9th undefeated season in the ACC, 23 seasons they've been in this conference, and they do it for the 9th time, and they have to face a good Georgia Tech team who is ranked pretty high and looks pretty good. Yeah,
it's funny, man. I really wasn't until, I guess, last Saturday when they were playing Georgia, and you looked at it and you're like, hey, that team's 9-2, and they're ranked pretty high, and here they are hanging, with Georgia at Georgia, and obviously they won that game in pretty stunning fashion. And I remember Monday earlier this week, I asked Jimbo Fisher, I said, man, do they feel just kind of like the quietest 10-2 team in the country? Because, it doesn't seem like they're garnering much attention, yet here they are. They've won 10 games. They rank really highly in a lot of offensive categories, certainly in rushing offense, and they look like a pretty tough team. And I think it's one of those, Florida State doesn't play Georgia Tech very often. This is the first time they played since the last ACC championship game. And so you almost kind of forget about them a little bit in what they're doing up there. It was a pretty big reminder to see them beat Georgia and then kind of look into them a little bit more this week.
Well, it was interesting because they were supposed to be on the schedule this year until Notre Dame hopped onto the schedule with the way that they've kind of joined the ACC and the other schools, and then they're promised, so many ACC teams and games in the season, and now, that pushed the Yellow Jackets off Florida State's regular season. They actually put the Citadel on there to prepare for Georgia Tech later on in the year, and then never wound up playing Georgia Tech, but looks like it's going to pay off, being that you're going to play them in a championship game now.
All's well that ends well, buddy. Works out just fine. So, and you know what? As funny as it sounds, that is a good thing. I don't think anybody would try to tell you that playing the Citadel is an exact replica of what Georgia Tech does, but it at least is a picture. It's an idea. You get the sense of what you're going to be in for, and I think that's valuable.
Well, and you wrote an article earlier this week about the Georgia Tech offense, what it's all about. This is quite the offense, the triple option team. What do people have to prepare for? What do you expect from a team like this?
Well, and you know what? I was corrected earlier this week. I have a good friend who went to Georgia Tech and is a big-time Georgia Tech fan. So I was talking to him a little bit about it. He said that actually everybody calls it the triple option, but the people in the know, if you will, it's the spread option. That's what Coach Paul Johnson calls it. And the triple option is a play that they run out of the spread option. So anyway, the more you know, kids. But anyway, no. So the big thing. I mean, honestly, I think it's kind of boring when the coaches and players say it. But the big thing is discipline. I think just about everybody on the defense has a man. It's one-on-one type of football, and if everybody executes their assignment and beats their one man, it's pretty you can defend it. The problem is there's lots of misdirection, there's lots of pre-snap movement, things that are designed to get you out of position, to tempt you away from your man. There's a lot of things that that wants a defender to think that the ball has already gone somewhere so that he can abandon his man, go to where he thinks he has the ball, and then all of a sudden, the ball's not there. It's 40 yards down the sideline. So like I said, it's I actually think it's kind of fun to watch. I know a lot of people might not like it. I think it's really interesting and kind of unique, and I think it's honestly kind of cool that something like that has had such a high level of success against some big name programs, because a lot of people were skeptical that it would work. So yeah, man, it's going to be a challenge for Florida State. I think Georgia Tech ran for, I want to say, close to 400 yards against Georgia last week and won that game. So yeah, it definitely should be interesting.
Well, yeah, they're one of 5 schools averaging 300-plus yards per game, and they rank 3rd in the nation in rushing offense with 333.8 rushing yards per game. They lead the nation with 12 straight games of 200-plus rushing yards. So something's got to give because the Noles are allowing just 133 rushing yards in ACC games this year. So, Florida State's defense going up against this offense. What do you expect here on Saturday?
Well, man, I think it's going to be tough. I think that, I wouldn't be alarmed if Georgia Tech exceeds Florida State's rushing yards per game average. I would expect that.
Right.
That's not necessarily a bad sign because, one, that's a pretty good rush defense. Two, Georgia Tech, they're going to run. They're going to run. They're going to run. They rank 120th in passing offense, and that isn't just because they're futile at it. It's just not what they do. They pass. Rarely as a way to to keep defenses honest, but in general, they're going to be running the ball. Two things that I think really jump out at me about the Florida State's defense going up against Georgia Tech's offense. One is the much ballyhooed storyline, if you will, of Charles Kelly, the Florida State defensive coordinator, was a longtime assistant at Georgia Tech, including Coach Kelly was actually on staff at Georgia Tech when Paul Johnson arrived. They opted to keep him on staff. He served in a variety of different capacities, including defensive coordinator for the second half of the 2012 season. He was in that capacity when he moved over to Florida State as the linebackers coach. So, Jimbo Fisher downplayed this angle a little bit earlier this week, but the fact is, if anybody, if any assistant on Florida State staff, anybody, in the stadium or in the football offices knows Georgia Tech's offense, it's Charles Kelly. He has a feel for it. He saw it firsthand and went against it in practice every single day for several years. So I do think that'll help. And then the other side of it is I was really intrigued by Mario Edwards Jr. this week, who is certainly one of Florida State's best defensive players, if not the best defensive player. A guy who, as a 300-pound defensive end, is going to be playing a really big part in this game tomorrow night. And we talked to him about it, and he said, "Man, in Texas, where he's from, everybody runs this offense. It's really common. So he's seen it a bunch. If you remember, he made his first career start against Georgia Tech 2 years ago in this game, in the ACC championship game, and we were all kind of wondering, oh man, how is this guy going to do? He's a big time recruit, big time prospect, but making your first start against Georgia Tech, the run heavy offense, how's he going to do? Well, we didn't know then at the time because he was a freshman and not allowed to talk to the media, but we didn't know that he was feeling just fine about it and didn't have any worries at all. And then he went out and showed that by having a really nice game. Georgia Tech finished well below their season average in that game, and Mario Edwards had, at the time, what was a career-high 7 tackles and looked just fantastic. So I think that he's kind of another ace in the hole for Florida State. We talked to him earlier this week, and he said that, looking at them on film, it's the exact same thing that they do that they always do, so it's not like he's expecting anything different, and that's a guy that I really think can play a key role for Florida State.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to bring him up because you wrote the article about him this week, and like you said, he finished with, at the time, a career-high 7 tackles, obviously because it was his first career start, and a tackle for loss. But Florida State had stopped the Yellow Jackets to just 183 yards rushing that day on 52 carries. That's pretty astounding when you're able to do that.
Oh, yeah, man. And if you remember, they needed him because, the offense got off to a nice start and then kind of struggled in the second half. And little Jeopardy trivia for you, it was Carlos Williams with the game-sealing interception, who was playing linebacker that night. So, yeah, that was a fun night. The first ACC championship in 7 years for Florida State, which is kind of unfathomable now as the Seminoles go for their third straight ACC title tomorrow night. It's hard to believe they ever went 7 years without one.
Yeah, and something else that's going to be kind of interesting to see tomorrow is the way that Georgia Tech converts on third downs. Two things that Florida State doesn't do particularly well: stopping teams on third down and time of possession. And those are two things that Georgia Tech does very well. As far as time of possession goes, they rank third in FBS, averaging time of possession. So, this is something where we need to see Florida State do a better job, stopping on third down and keeping the ball.
Well, and those two, they really dovetail together, the third down conversions and time of possession, right? And the big thing, why Georgia Tech's able to do that is, you run for 3 yards on first down, 4 or 5 yards on second down, and now you're in 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3. They stay out of a lot of third and long situations. And when you do that, obviously, you just keep the clock running. And I think you saw, Boston College did that really well against FSU. Even the Citadel, Florida State only got, I think, 8 total possessions in that game. And yeah, man, that's kind of the MO for those offenses and those teams. And in my own opinion, I think that's your best chance to beat Florida State is to keep their offense on the sideline, and that's what Georgia Tech is good at.
speaking of what they're good at, their defense doesn't get too much credit. They're not the best in the nation. They're in the top 60 though, and what they do well on defense is forcing turnovers. And Florida State obviously had a terrible time with turnovers last game against Florida. You look at this defense for Georgia Tech; they have 123 points off turnovers, which is the fourth most in FBS. I think that's your number one priority is control and limit turnovers tomorrow.
Well, yeah, it's a huge part of every game, but let's take it back to what we were just saying. If you know that you're only getting 7, 8, 9 possessions in the game, you can't have 2, 3, 4 of those end up in their hands.
Right.
Especially, they've got several guys, lots of interception returns for touchdowns, fumble returns for touchdowns. And again, if you're only getting the ball 8 times and 2 of them end up as interceptions in a Yellow Jacket defender's hands and 1 of them end up in the end zone, well, now, you're really behind the 8 ball more so than you usually would be. So, no, Florida State just can't have that. I was writing about it a little bit earlier today in the First and 10 column. That will go up later this afternoon, kids. Now, I was writing about that Jamus Winston is coming off easily the toughest performance of his career,
right.
Through 4 interceptions, and I think it was just like 125 yards. Look, they showed last week that they can overcome that, but you really don't want to get in the habit of having your quarterback throw 4 interceptions. And with a defense as opportunistic as Georgia Tech's, it can really put you in a bad way. And, it's the obvious formula. You throw an interception, there's either it's return for a touchdown or a short field position. Now you're down. Georgia Tech's got a little bit of a lead, and they can just drain that clock. And all of a sudden, it's a short game, and you look up and you realize that you might not be on the outcome that you want. So. And I don't mean to make it out like Georgia Tech is the 85 Bears, but I do think that what they do well can be a problem for FSU.
Absolutely, and let's stick it right there with Jamus Winston. And like you said, coming off his worst performance as a starter, 25-0. But Jimbo Fisher said yesterday in his interview that Jamus Winston is having by far his best week of practice, he thinks. Coming off a game where he didn't play well. This is a true competitor. We've seen him be able to, get all the distractions out of his head based off the field things. And this guy comes onto the field and he shines in these kind of moments. What do you expect from him on Saturday?
I think he'll be good, man. Like I said this earlier this year is, I'm not betting against that guy until he gives a reason to. And the fact is, for better or worse, he's won every single game that he started. Some have been really pretty, some have been not so pretty, but at the end of the day, it's always been a win. It sounds so kind of, lame sports writer cliche, but the truth is, man, the guy finds a way to win. His teammates find a way to lift themselves up around him, and big game, championship game situation. I think he tends to shine. When the lights are on, and I think that he will again. I think as always, he's kind of Florida State's X factor. Like we're talking about all these subplots and factors in this game, and I think they're all relevant. But the fact of the matter is, if Jamus Winston plays up to his talent level and plays up to his capability, I really don't think Florida State has much to worry about.
And then as far as running backs goes, Carlos Williams is out for the game. We didn't talk about this either. Terrence Smith is questionable as well. Jimbo Fisher said it'll be a game-time decision. Regardless, though, Matthew Thomas will start the game for Florida State. Whether Terrence can go or not, Matthew Thomas will start. And he's actually shown very good glimpses of what he can do in a game. We've seen him play pretty well this season. We haven't seen too much of him because of injury and being suspended as well. But this is a guy that's very athletic and can be a very big help for this defense going up against Georgia Tech's offense.
Oh, yeah, man. I think if he's the kind of guy that if he can rein in his physical tools, I think he can play a really big part. I think he's fast, he's athletic, he's big, he's strong, he's everything you want in a linebacker. What you worry about a guy in his position, a redshirt freshman with relatively limited playing experience, is just the discipline, and especially like they like to call the eye discipline of this, having to go against this offense, because I think for a young player who's really, really fast. Georgia Tech kind of thrives. The way they do this, the way this offense works, is it almost uses your speed and your athleticism against you. They set you up to where you're running full speed to the wrong place. So you have to be mentally sound as well as physically sound. And not to say that Matthew can't do that or isn't capable of it, because I certainly think that he is, but he hasn't had to do it yet. And so I think that this is a pretty big challenge for him. And he's another guy, man. If he plays this well, he definitely has all the physical tools to play it well. And if he trusts his eyes and stays true to his assignments, I think he can be a pretty big factor in the game.
Yeah. So that was the longest roundabout way to get back to Dalvin Cook. That was where I was trying to go with this, saying that Carlos Williams will not play. A big factor for Florida State will be Dalvin Cook, who already has 3 100-yard rushing games in his career, and he's just 161 rushing yards away from the FSU freshman single-season rushing record, and 2 touchdowns away from the freshman record as well for rushing touchdowns. This guy has really shined, and it's going to be on him now to really get this run game going with Carlos Williams out.
Yeah, man, and I think for a lot of Florida State fans, they've been asking for a bigger role for Dalvin Cook, hoping for a bigger role for Dalvin Cook. Well, here it is, it's a great opportunity for him. I think it's a good thing for Florida State. Look, I don't think Florida State. I want to make this clear. I don't think Florida State is a better team without Carlos Williams. I think he brings a lot to the table. I think he's a strong runner, a powerful runner, and his experience. So I don't want to say by any stretch that Florida State is made better by his absence, but I do think that Dalvin Cook carried the ball 24 times last week, something like that. It was in the high to mid 20s. It was his career high, and it was the number of touches. He got a couple touches in the passing game too, and it's the number of touches that quite frankly are almost uncommon for running backs these days. A lot of guys don't want to get their backs that many work, open them up to potential injuries, and it's a rare guy who I think can handle that type of workload. Well, Dalvin Cook quite clearly can, did last week, and the fact that FSU doesn't have a game next week, won't have a game again until January. They can kind of, I don't want to say run him into the ground, but they can get him some extra touches knowing that he doesn't have to play next week. So yeah, man, I'm really interested to see what he can do, how he sort of rises to the occasion. And you didn't mention this before, but I'm also intrigued to see where exactly Mario Pender fits in. He got off to a great start of the season, got hurt at Syracuse, and then quite frankly, has been almost a non-factor ever since. And I think some of that has been Dalvin Cook's emergence, and some of that I think is just Mario, if he's ever quite fully recovered from his ankle. But I am wondering if he will play a role tomorrow night.
Yeah, Coach did say that Mario will see the playing field a little bit more now that Carlos is out. But to your point about Dalvin carrying the ball a lot, 6 games this year he's had double-digit carries, and 2 of those were over 20 carries. He had 24 last game against Florida and 23 against Syracuse when Pender went down. So he will definitely have a big factor, will be playing a big factor against Georgia Tech. How do you see this one playing out? ACC championship game. This is Florida State needs to win this one if they want to even be considered into the playoffs. We saw them drop, which we're going to talk about here in a second. But how do you see this one playing out tomorrow?
Well, man, I thought there was a chance earlier this week before the rankings came out that Florida State could lose a game and still maybe sneak their way into the playoffs. Now I'm really not so sure. And like you said, we'll get to that in a second. Man, I look at it, kind of the way I did sort of those Miami and Boston College games. Is I think what Georgia Tech does well is kind of strikes at the heart of some of Florida State's weaknesses. But I also think that because of the way FSU has won some of these games and the nature of this season and the close calls and the comebacks and all that, it's kind of created a tendency, at least among me and I think some other people that cover the team and cover college football. It's created a tendency to look at FSU's next opponent and sort of like create a juggernaut that isn't really there. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And look, man, I think Georgia Tech's a really good team, and I think they absolutely can win the game Saturday night. They can. But they did lose to North Carolina, who's not very good. They did lose to Duke, who I think, again, is a nice team, but not spectacular. They almost lost to Georgia Southern earlier in the year. Now, again, I know, first games of the year, second games of the year, teams change from there. But all I'm saying is, we're not talking about the New England Patriots.
Right.
I think Georgia Tech's a good team, but they're not unbeatable. I go back to, again, not so much Florida State's defense, because I think Georgia Tech's going to get theirs, especially in the running game. I think they're going to be able to run the ball. I think they're going to score some points. To me, it's on Florida State's defense. If you get 8 possessions, how many of those can you score on? Can you maximize your possessions? And so then it comes back to, one, Dalvin Cook, obviously, and how he's able to play. And 2, not to belabor the point, but Jamus Winston. I think if Jamus Winston is Jamus Winston that we know he can be, I think Florida State wins this pretty comfortably. If Florida State struggles and turns the ball over, then it could get a little bit hairier in the fourth quarter.
It's going to be interesting. Florida State and Georgia Tech going at it 8 p.m. Tomorrow in North Carolina.
Going to snow?
It's supposed to rain.
Is it?
It's been raining all day today here in Charlotte, and supposed to do the exact same tomorrow.
Well, it looks like snow out the window, doesn't it?
A little bit.
I think so.
It does. Now, as far as the playoffs go, Florida State may have favored a little bit by dropping, being that they're going to actually, if everything stays the same, they will play in New Orleans, which is a lot closer than Pasadena to Tallahassee. It'll allow fans to travel a little bit better. And that's kind of an interesting matchup, Florida State going against Alabama. So Florida State drops from 3 to 4 if you live under a rock. And they would face number 1 Alabama. Oregon would face TCU. A pretty interesting thing, but I really think that this whole playoff thing is driven by money and ratings because if you think about it, more fans are going to travel to that game in New Orleans than they would at Pasadena.
Well, I think so too, man. And look, that almost sounds, kind of like conspiracy theorist, but but at the same time, it's kind of whatever, right?
Right.
I think New Orleans is a better spot for Florida State. It's easier for the team to travel to, certainly easier for fans to travel to. So yeah, it'll be interesting. I'm curious to see, just how these games shake out. If Florida State wins big, and Oregon, who plays Arizona tonight, if that's a close game and they squeeze that out, or even if Oregon were to lose, what would happen? And they've lost 2 straight to Arizona.
Right.
I don't think the rankings are set in stone yet, and I'm not convinced that just having all 4 of those teams, if they just win. I'm not convinced that those rankings will stay exactly the same. I think TCU plays Iowa State tomorrow. I think they've won 2 games this year. So if TCU plays Iowa State and Florida State handles Georgia Tech, I could see them flip flopping again and Florida State being up to number 3, and then you're back in that Pasadena game. So we're kind of near the end of that process, but I do think there's still some moving left to go. But man, all said, if you're asking me, I think I was joking about it earlier this week, but I think really the best solution for this situation is just to close your eyes, take a deep breath, and imagine that Florida State is number 1,
right,
and Alabama is number 4.
I love that.
And
told me that last night.
Problem solved. Problem solved. Then we're good because then now you have your game in New Orleans, which is a few hours from Tallahassee. You got a big time Southeastern Conference opponent in Alabama, who, in my own personal opinion, deserves to be in the playoff. But I think they're number 1 based on some sort of legacy factors more than some on field factors. And now you've got a juicy matchup between the master and the Padawan, between Nick Saban and Jimbo Fisher, if you will. That's a Star Wars reference for all
Which
you guys.
The trailer just came out.
Yeah. There you go. You got the teacher against the protege, and Nick Saban and Jimbo Fisher. Would be in the state of Alabama where they both coached. Jamus Winston going up against the Alabama Crimson Tide, who another home state school for him, played Auburn last year, would be playing Alabama this year. There's a lot of really good storylines involved in a Florida State Alabama game. So personally, I'd love to see it. If you want to take umbrage with the way that matchup is set up, I certainly wouldn't stop anybody, but the actual game itself, I think, would be pretty spectacular.
Well, Florida State has to get past Georgia Tech first and continue the 28-game win streak, move it to 29. Today, a couple things going on. Jimbo Fisher talking to the media, and then the Legends Dinner. Cameron Irving going to be honored. He won in back-to-back years now the Jacobs Blocking Trophy given to the ACC's top offensive lineman. He wins it. He becomes just the 4th Seminole to win it multiple times, and he wins it in back-to-back years. So he'll be honored tonight, and Derek Brooks will be there at that dinner.
Is that right? That'd be pretty cool. Get those guys together.
Absolutely. So that's something to look forward to. And then they have the block party tomorrow before the game, I believe in the Epicenter, and then the game at 8 p.m. It should be a good one here in Charlotte, North Carolina, in the Bank of America Stadium where the Carolina Panthers play. Before we wrap it up, a couple other housekeeping things. Volleyball won their first NCAA tournament game this year. They play Bama today. And then soccer playing Stanford today in the Final Four. They got to get past another Pac-12 team in order to get to the national championship game, which is on Sunday. So both teams in the hunt in the playoffs, and then both basketball teams playing men's tomorrow, women's on Sunday, who are coming off an overtime win over Purdue in West Lafayette. Well,
it's another full weekend, man. I think it's really going to be a big weekend for soccer. Obviously the the Pacific teams, they kind of scare you. It seems like they always run into a Stanford or UCLA or USC. They've all kind of taken turns of being in Florida State's nightmares. So, I keep a close eye on that one tonight, and if they can get past that, get past Stanford, then all of a sudden, you got to be feeling pretty excited, even more so than you are right now. And yeah, as far as the men's basketball team goes, we were there Monday night against Nebraska. Tough first half followed by a great second half.
Yeah,
and
great second half.
Come up just short. So it was, on the one hand, disappointing that they couldn't pull out that game, but on the other hand, really encouraging to see just how well they could play in the second half. And so, you'd like to think if you can translate that second half against Nebraska into the first half Saturday against UCF, you might be able to make something special happen. So, yeah, man, it's a fun weekend, fun time of year, and a lot going on.
So, yeah, those are some great teams to watch, some great games to watch, and then Florida State, if they can pull this one out over Georgia Tech tomorrow, the selection show will be at 12:45 on Sunday, and we'll find out exactly where Florida State is going for that first game of the playoff. So that's going to do it for us on the road in Charlotte, North Carolina. We'll come back to you next week, recap everything, and we appreciate you guys listening. Enjoy the game tomorrow, 8 p.m. against Georgia Tech. We'll see you then.